Have you ever stared at a picture that was completely still, yet somehow parts of it seemed to move? Perhaps patterns appeared to swirl, or maybe shapes looked like they were slowly drifting. This is a very common experience for many people. It can be quite surprising the first time it happens. You might look closer at the image, you might even touch the screen or the paper. You want to check if something is actually moving, but the image itself remains perfectly unmoving. This strange effect is not a trick of your computer, it is not a special animation. The feeling can be a little confusing. You know the image is static. Your eyes tell you it should not be moving at all. However, a part of your brain insists that it sees movement. This creates a small puzzle in your mind. You might blink a few times, you might look away and then look back. You try to understand what is going on with your vision. It is a curious moment. We trust our eyes to show us the world as it truly is. So when they show us something like this, it makes us wonder. It makes us question how we see. So why does this strange visual event occur? How can a completely still picture play such a vivid trick on our senses? The answer lies not on the page or the screen. The answer is inside our own wonderfully complex brains. Our brains are constantly working hard to interpret the world around us. They take in information from our eyes, then they build a picture of reality for us. Sometimes the way certain images are designed can lead to these fascinating misinterpretations. These are known as optical illusions. They are a window into how our minds work. In this exploration, we will journey into the world of optical illusions. We will look specifically at those that seem to move. We will uncover the science behind why our brains create this sense of motion from stillness. It is a fascinating field of study. It tells us so much about our own perception. It reveals the intricate processes happening within our minds every single second. Understanding these illusions helps us appreciate the power and the quirks of our visual system. It is a journey into the very nature of how we perceive reality itself. Our ability to see begins with our eyes. Light from the world around us enters each eye. It passes through the clear front part called the cornea. Then it goes through the pupil, which is the dark opening in the center of the colored iris. The iris can change the size of the pupil. This controls how much light gets inside. The light then passes through the lens. The lens focuses the light onto the back of the eye. This back part is called the retina. The retina is like the screen in a cinema where the image is projected. It is covered in special cells. These special cells in the retina are called photoreceptors. There are two main types of photoreceptors. They are known as rods and cones. Rods are very sensitive to light. They help us see in dim conditions. They mostly detect black, white, and shades of grey. Cones, on the other hand, work best in bright light. Cones are responsible for our ability to see colours. When light hits these rods and cones, a chemical reaction happens. This reaction converts the light energy into tiny electrical signals. These signals are the first step in the process of vision. They carry the raw information from the image. Once the light is converted into electrical signals, the journey continues. These signals travel from the photoreceptor cells to other nerve cells in the retina. Eventually, they reach the optic nerve. The optic nerve is like a cable. It is made up of many nerve fibers. It runs from the back of each eye. Its job is to carry all these electrical signals away from the eye. The destination for these signals is the brain. Specifically, they travel to an area at the back of the brain. This area is called the visual cortex. It is the brain's main center for processing visual information. It is very important to understand a key point here. What we consciously see is not simply what our eyes detect. Our eyes capture light and convert it into signals, but the brain is what makes sense of these signals. The visual cortex and other brain areas work together. They interpret the patterns of signals. They construct our perception of shapes, colors, movement, and depth. So, vision is an active process of interpretation by the brain. It is not just a passive recording like a camera. This interpretation process is where illusions can occur. Our brain can sometimes interpret the signals in surprising ways. Motion illusions are a fascinating type of optical illusion. They occur when a static, unmoving image appears to be moving. You look at the picture and your brain tells you something is wiggling, rotating, or drifting. However, if you examine the image closely, you will find no actual movement. The lines are printed still, the colors are fixed in place. This kind of illusion is often very powerful. It can be hard to convince yourself that nothing is truly shifting. A famous example is the rotating snakes illusion. Many people see the circular patterns in this image slowly turning. When people experience these motion illusions, they describe various sensations. Some see a gentle pulsing or shimmering effect. Others perceive a more definite flowing or swirling motion. The apparent movement can sometimes be in a specific direction. For instance, patterns might seem to expand outwards from the center, or they might appear to contract inwards. The strength of the illusion can also vary from person to person. Some individuals might see a lot of movement, others might see only a little, or even none at all. This variation highlights the role of individual brain processing. The crucial thing to remember is that the movement is not real. It is not present in the physical stimulus itself. The image on the paper or screen is completely stationary. The magic, or rather the science, is happening inside your head. Your visual system, particularly your brain, is being tricked. It is interpreting the static visual information in a way that generates a false perception of motion. This is not a sign that something is wrong with your eyes. Instead, it demonstrates how our brains are wired to detect motion. Sometimes this system can be activated by specific static patterns. This leads to a very interesting question. How can our brain, which is usually so good at understanding the world, create motion where there is none? What is it about these particular images that causes this effect? Scientists who study vision and the brain are very interested in these questions. By studying how and why still images appear to move, they can learn more about the complex mechanisms our brains use to perceive real movement. These illusions act like puzzles. Solving them helps us understand the normal workings of our visual perception system. They show us the active role our brain plays in constructing what we see. One common type of motion illusion that makes still images appear to move is called the peripheral drift illusion. These illusions often feature repeating patterns of contrasting brightness or colors. When you look slightly away from the main pattern, or when the image is in your peripheral vision, the movement seems to start. The effect is usually strongest when your eyes are not fixated on one spot. The brain's motion detectors in the periphery are thought to be more easily fooled by these specific arrangements of light and dark or contrasting colors. This leads to the perception of movement. Another factor that contributes to some motion illusions is our own tiny eye movements. Even when we think we are staring perfectly still at an object, our eyes are constantly making very small, quick movements. These are called microsaccades. These movements are usually too small for us to notice consciously. However, when we look at certain complex, repetitive patterns, these tiny eye shifts can interact with the pattern. The brain might interpret the slight shift of the pattern on our retina caused by the microsaccade as actual movement within the image itself. It's an attempt by the brain to make sense of subtle changes. The specific arrangement of colors and shapes in these illusions is also critically important. Many motion illusions use patterns with sharp contrasts in luminance. Luminance refers to the brightness of an area. For example, a pattern might have alternating patches of very bright white and very dark black, or it might use highly contrasting colors placed next to each other in a specific sequence. These strong contrasts can trigger responses in the motion-sensitive neurons in our visual cortex. These neurons are normally activated by real movement. But certain static patterns can mimic the signals that these neurons expect from moving objects. Furthermore, our brain is always trying to predict what will happen next. This includes predicting movement. It has evolved to be very good at detecting motion because this was important for survival. For example, it helped our ancestors spot predators or find prey. Some static illusionary patterns might contain cues that are similar to the cues our brain uses to detect real motion. The brain then fills in the perception of movement based on these misleading cues. It's like the brain is making its best guess, but in this case, the static image leads it to an incorrect conclusion about motion. Section 5. Beyond movement, a spectrum of visual tricks. While motion illusions are captivating, they are just one category in a vast world of optical illusions. Our brains can be tricked in many other ways by static images. Another major type is geometric illusions. These illusions play with our perception of size, length, shape, or straightness. Lines that are perfectly straight might appear curved. Shapes that are identical might seem different in size. These illusions demonstrate how our brain uses context and surrounding information to judge geometric properties. They show that our perception of even simple shapes isn't always straightforward. A well-known example of a geometric illusion is the Muller-Lyer illusion. In this illusion, we see two lines of the same length. However, one line has arrowheads pointing inwards at its ends. The other line has arrowheads pointing outwards. Most people perceive the line with outward-pointing arrowheads as being longer. Another example is the Ponzo illusion. Here, two identical lines are placed over a pair of converging lines, like railway tracks receding into the distance. The line that appears further away due to the perspective cues is perceived as being longer. These illusions highlight how depth cues can distort our size perception. Color illusions are another fascinating group. These illusions show how our perception of a color can be dramatically affected by the colors surrounding it. For instance, the same shade of gray can look much lighter when placed against a dark background. It can look much darker when placed against a light background. This is called simultaneous contrast. Other color illusions might make two different colors look the same, or one color appear to be tinged with its complementary color when viewed next to a strong hue. These illusions reveal that we don't see colors in isolation. Our brain processes color information relative to the entire visual scene. Finally, there are ambiguous illusions. These are images that can be interpreted by the brain in more than one way. A famous example is the Necker cube. This is a simple line drawing of a cube that can appear to flip its orientation. At one moment, one face seems to be at the front. At the next, a different face appears to be at the front. Another example is Rubens' vase. This image can be seen either as two faces looking at each other or as a vase in the center. Our brain cannot usually see both interpretations at the exact same time. It tends to switch back and forth between the possible perceptions. Section 6. The mind's eye perception and what we expect to see. Perception is the complex process our brain uses to make sense of the world. It's how we organize and interpret the information we receive from our senses. This includes sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. When we talk about optical illusions, we're focusing on visual perception. Our brain takes the raw data sent from our eyes and actively works to form a meaningful picture of what is out there. This process is not just about receiving information, it's about understanding it and giving it meaning. It helps us navigate our environment and interact with it effectively. It's important to understand that perception is an active, not a passive process. Our brain does not simply create a perfect copy of the outside world like a camera taking a photograph. Instead, it constructs our reality. It uses the incoming sensory signals, but it also uses our past experiences, our knowledge, and our expectations. The brain often fills in missing information and makes assumptions to create a coherent and stable view of the world. Usually these assumptions are correct and help us see things accurately and quickly. But sometimes these very assumptions can lead to perceptual errors, like optical illusions. Our expectations play a significant role in what we perceive. If we expect to see a certain object or pattern, our brain is primed to find it. This means we might be more likely to interpret ambiguous information in a way that fits our expectations. For example, if you're expecting a friend to arrive, you might mistakenly think you see them in a crowd, even if it's someone else who looks vaguely similar. In the context of optical illusions, our brain might expect certain visual cues to mean certain things. For example, it expects converging lines to indicate depth, which is why the Ponzo illusion works so well. Optical illusions cleverly exploit these assumptions and the brain's natural tendencies. They present visual information that plays on the rules and shortcuts our brain uses to interpret scenes. When an image contains conflicting cues or cues that trigger an incorrect assumption, an illusion can occur. For instance, in motion illusions, specific patterns might trigger the motion detection system even when nothing is moving. The brain is trying to make the best sense of the input, but the input itself is designed to be misleading. This shows that what we see is a blend of what is actually there and what our brain interprets based on its built-in rules and past learning. Section 7. Focus, please. Attention's role in illusory experiences. Attention is a fundamental cognitive process. It refers to our ability to selectively concentrate on one particular aspect of our environment while trying to ignore other distracting things. Think of it like a spotlight. Your attention can shine on one specific piece of information, making it clearer in your mind, while other things outside the spotlight remain in the background. We use attention constantly in our daily lives. It helps us focus on a conversation in a noisy room. It allows us to read a book without being distracted by everything else around us. It's essential for learning and performing tasks. The way we direct our attention can significantly influence how we experience optical illusions. For some illusions, especially certain motion illusions like the peripheral drift type, focused attention can change the effect. If you stare directly and intently at a specific part of such an illusion, the perceived movement in that particular spot might slow down or even stop completely. This happens because your focused attention might be overriding the more automatic processes in your peripheral vision that are generating the illusion of motion. Your brain is perhaps analyzing the fixated spot with more scrutiny, realizing it's static. Conversely, when our attention is divided, or when we are not focusing intently on the image, we might be more susceptible to certain illusions. If you are just glancing at an image or it's in the corner of your eye, your brain might rely more on its quick automatic processing systems. These systems are more easily fooled by the tricky cues in an illusion. For example, the apparent movement in some illusions is often stronger when you let your gaze wander over the image rather than fixing it on one point. This allows the mechanisms that create the illusion, often related to peripheral vision or slight eye movements, to operate more freely. Optical illusions can also be very effective at capturing our attention. The surprising or puzzling nature of an illusion naturally draws us in. When we see something that violates our expectations, like a still image that seems to move, it piques our curiosity. We instinctively want to look closer and figure out what is happening. This engagement of attention is part of what makes illusions so intriguing. They challenge our perceptual system, and our attention is a key tool our brain uses to try and resolve that challenge. Thus, attention both affects illusions and is affected by them. Section 8. Thinking traps, cognitive biases, and visual puzzles. Cognitive biases are like mental shortcuts that our brains use. They are systematic patterns of thinking that can sometimes lead us away from making perfectly logical or rational judgments. Our brains have developed these shortcuts to help us process information quickly and efficiently. In many situations, these shortcuts are very helpful. They allow us to make rapid decisions and understand complex situations without too much effort. However, because they are shortcuts, they can sometimes lead to errors in thinking or judgment. There are many different types of cognitive biases that can affect how we think and behave. There is an interesting connection between cognitive biases and visual illusions. You can think of optical illusions as a visual form of these mental shortcuts going slightly awry. Just as cognitive biases can cause errors in our thinking, optical illusions cause errors in our visual perception. Our visual system has its own set of shortcuts and assumptions. These are usually very effective for quickly interpreting the visual world. But when presented with an image specifically designed to exploit these shortcuts, our visual system can be led to an incorrect interpretation. This results in us seeing something that isn't really there, like movement in a still image. Consider the Ponzo illusion again, where two identical lines on converging tracks appear to be different sizes. This illusion works because our brain has a strong bias to interpret two-dimensional images with perspective cues as representing a three-dimensional scene. The converging lines strongly suggest depth, like looking down a real road. Our brain automatically assumes that an object appearing further away in such a scene, yet taking up the same amount of space on our retina, must be physically larger. This is usually a correct assumption in the real three-dimensional world, but in the two-dimensional illusion, this bias leads to a misjudgment of the line's actual lengths. It is important to remember that these errors in perception, like those caused by optical illusions, are not signs of a faulty brain. Rather, they are side effects of a highly efficient and generally very accurate visual processing system. Our brain is constantly making its best guess based on the available information and its built-in rules. Illusions simply highlight the situations where these normally reliable rules lead to a perception that doesn't match physical reality. Understanding these visual biases helps scientists learn more about the standard operating procedures of our visual brain, revealing how it constructs our everyday experience of seeing. Section 9: Unveiling the Mind, What Illusions Teach Us About Ourselves. Optical illusions are much more than just amusing visual puzzles or fun tricks to share with friends. While they certainly can be entertaining, their true value lies in what they reveal about the human mind. For scientists, especially neuroscientists and psychologists who study the brain and behavior, optical illusions are powerful tools. They offer unique insights into the hidden workings of our visual system. By carefully designing illusions and observing how people perceive them, researchers can learn about the complex processes that turn light into sight. They help us map out how our brain constructs our visual reality. Studying how we perceive illusions, particularly why we might see movement in a static image, helps scientists understand the specific mechanisms our brain uses to process visual information. It can tell us about the different pathways in the brain that handle color, shape, and motion. When an illusion breaks the system or causes a misinterpretation, it highlights the normal rules and assumptions that the system usually follows. For example, motion illusions demonstrate the sensitivity of our motion detection circuits and how they can be activated even by stationary patterns if those patterns have certain characteristics. This helps us understand how we detect real motion so effectively. These fascinating visual phenomena powerfully demonstrate that our perception is not a passive recording of the world. It is not like a camera simply taking a picture. Instead, our brain actively constructs our reality. It takes the raw sensory data from our eyes and interprets it, fills in gaps, and makes inferences based on past experience and built-in knowledge. Illusions are a clear example of this constructive process. They show us that what we see is an interpretation, a model of the world created by our brain. And sometimes this model can differ from physical reality in predictable and informative ways. In conclusion, optical illusions, especially those that make still images appear to move, serve as a compelling reminder of the brain's complexity and its active role in our experience. They unveil the sophisticated and sometimes surprising ways our brains work to make sense of the constant stream of information from our environment. These visual puzzles are not just about fooling the eye, they are about understanding the mind. They show us that our brains are constantly working, interpreting and predicting. And in those moments when an illusion captures our attention, we get a glimpse into the remarkable processes that create our very sense of sight and reality.